just wanna find peace. You're just like me, just wanna breathe. You wanna stand up, you wanna be free, you wanna be loved. Need someone to listen, wanna speak out, wanna be forgiven. You're just like me underneath. And when the night falls and the world stops and it seems like all is lost, deep down there's a sunrise. We're all one human soul. You're just like me, just wanna breathe. You wanna stand up, you wanna be free, you wanna be loved. Need someone to listen, wanna speak out, you wanna be forgiven. You're just like me underneath. You're just like me.
Welcome, welcome everybody to Urban Consulate Cincinnati live streaming virtually tonight. It is so good to see all of you joining us. We have many people joining us here in our Zoom room. We've also got people joining us in Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook tonight, as usual, I want to encourage you to look for that Zoom link in the comments because you are welcome to join us for our signature breakout dialogues after we hear from our guests tonight. It's so good to see everybody. Welcome, welcome. I want to also remind everybody to please keep signing up for Eventbrite for all of our upcoming events. Urban Consulate Cincinnati convenes our discussions every second Monday in the evening at 7 p.m. These conversations are free, they're open, and we want to make sure that you get the link to join us. And so we can share space and continue to build community together. So thank you. So tonight, we are wanting to share some special acknowledgement for the onset of the month of Ramadan. For any of our participants out there who are celebrating the start of this very, very solemn month of reflection. It's a month of spiritual deepening. It's a month of spiritual connection in the Islamic faith. So a very, very hearty and heartfelt Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. So the conversation that we are coming into tonight is big, and it's one that, and I think I say this about every consulate talk, because every topic that we dive into has such meaning in a way that just gets me really excited. But this topic in particular is one that I continue to say is setting me ablaze for many reasons, right? And the conversation as it's evolving has pushed me and our consulate team to think about this topic. How are women changing city building in new, different, big, bold, and joyous ways? So I'm really excited to give you a little preview as to what you're in for this evening. And the context, of course, is pretty huge, right? So we are coming off of a month, Women's History Month, right? We get 1 month, y'all. Where we are celebrating the contributions, the stories of women around the globe, right? Their triumphs, celebrating women's challenges, right? The joy that we bring, right? And we're also still in the context of COVID-19, where so many essential workers who are on the front lines happen to be women, right? A lot of them women of color. And we find these entrenched inequities have been, the curtain has been brought back on those entrenched inequities. And yet, essential workers, those on the front lines, are the ones that are literally keeping our cities afloat, our towns afloat with their contributions to keep people well, right? And with this question, how are women changing city building, came a whole cascade of new questions, as does happen with Urban Consulate, right? We always end up with more questions than we do answers, which I would say is the right approach. But some of the questions that emerge for us are like, so cities are systems, right? And so there are things that are seen, things that are unseen, that create the components of city building. So just what does it mean to build a city? So we're going to unpack that a little bit. We also we're going to try to tease out anyway, what are the elements of city building that women are changing? What are the things that we've identified that need to shift and how we think about our collective systems of cities and city building? Even bigger questions emerge for us around women. So just what does it mean to be a woman? You can begin to see already where this conversation is going. The scope is huge. We're going to try to walk away with some discernible pieces of learning, collective knowledge sharing. But in a world that's rejecting, the harmful and restrictive gender binary, traditional gender binary, just how do we consider, who are we talking about when we're talking about women? And in particular, what role have Black women played in expanding our view of feminist politics? Because we know if a city is indeed essentially a collection, a showcase of hard infrastructure, built environment and place, by that very same token, cities reflect big ideas, right? And we're going to talk about the ideas that Black women are bringing to city building that shift and ignite how we think about our world and how we think about equity. So there's so many layers to this conversation. We'll talk about the complexities, the joy, the challenges, the struggles. And I hope we all walk away with some more discernible piece and answers and musings and meanderings in this question: how are women changing city building, right? So this dialogue will not be possible without three tremendous guests, of whom I'm going to bring to the Urban Consulate virtual stage right now, each of whom contribute to city building right here in Cincinnati. And I'm so, so, so glad to welcome them. First, we have Danny McLean. Welcome, Danny. Danny reports on race and reproductive health. She is a contributing writer at The Nation and a fellow with Type Media Center. Danny's writing has appeared in many, many outlets, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Atlantic, Slate, and Ebony, to name a few. In 2018, she received the James Aronson Award for Social Justice Journalism. Her work has been recognized by the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association, the National Association of Black Journalists, and Planned Parenthood Federation of America. McLean was a staff reporter at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and has worked as a strategist with organizations including Color of Change and Drug Policy Alliance. Danny McLean's book, We Live for the We, The Political Power of Black Motherhood, was published in April 2019 by Bold Type Books. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Next up, we have Kiana Trabue. Kiana is a longtime city builder here in Cincinnati. We are so, so glad to have you, and part of Urban Consulate's family since the very beginning. When we launched back at People's Liberty in November of 2019, Kiana was one of our first cross-city guests. So it feels so good to welcome you back to the Consulate stage. Kiana Trabue is soon to be the fourth, I don't know if I can say this, on live Facebook. Can I?
You can say whatever you want, Naima.
Oh, I'm just excited to be able to celebrate you and your news. Kiana Trabue is soon to be the former executive director of the Health Collaborative, where for years she has served in leading the region's health agenda, Gen H, which is focused on activating data-driven solutions to reduce the impact of chronic disease and build a care system that is healthy by design. Come on, Kiana. Yes. I read on your Facebook page, you were like, look, y'all, this is a big, big job. I'm glad about my next step. We are just happy to have had you as an incredible leader in that space for so many years.
Thank you so much.
Additionally, Kiana has served on the Mill Creek Alliance Board, Cradle Cincinnati's Advisory Board, Planned Parenthood of Southwest Ohio's Board, Health Policy Institute of Ohio's Health Equity Advisory Group, Ohio Diversity Council Cincinnati Advisory Board, Xavier University's Population Health Advisory Board, Hamilton County Public Health's Public Advisory Council. And I see that this is missing from this, but you are also vice mayor of the city of Woodlawn.
Yes, I am vice mayor of the village of Woodlawn. Been in that position since January of 2021. So shout out to beautiful Woodlawn.
Yeah, shout out to beautiful Woodlawn. Welcome, welcome, Kiana.
Thank you.
Also, so glad to connect with Elise Daniel. Elise Daniel is also an old consulate family member who was also one of our first guest speakers when we launched in November 2019. So it feels good to welcome you back as well, Elise. Elise Daniel is a Cincinnati writer who explores the intersection of poetry, prose, and memoir. She was a contributing author of Seven Hills and A Queen to Name Them, a love poem for Cincinnati, crafted by Chase Public and commissioned by Artworks. Last summer, after the murder of George Floyd, Elise was commissioned by the Weston Gallery to produce a text-based window mural to give voice to the frustration, to the anger within the African American community. This 4-panel work entitled Structured Veil was presented across boarded up windows that were covered as a result of their breakage. Those that know Elise know that she is a bike polo enthusiast. Yes, yes. And one deeply invested in civic life. Welcome, welcome, Elise.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And joining us a little later to facilitate our breakout rooms is my friend, a spiritual leader in our city, Megan Trishler, and my fellow Urban Consulate co-host. Megan is a designer, spiritual director who accompanies people on their journeys of faith and action. Megan is a space maker who has a heart for working at neighborhood scale, and that passion has taken her to cities around the world. And she's had the opportunity to collaborate on a number of participatory projects in both rural and urban communities. Welcome, welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Naima. Good to be here.
Without further delay, I welcome gladly, happily, Elise Daniel to the Urban Consulate virtual stage for some original spoken word.
Yeah, so I wanted to share a couple of things. I'm going to share a poem that I wrote specifically for today. And then I also wanted to share, and what I've been kind of like advocating for, I guess, the latest few times that I've been reading, is to share work that already exists in the world. There's already so many wonderful things that people have written who have said it better than I can say it, and it's been documented and laid. I also recently just started reading a lot of Mouths of Rain, which is an anthology of Black lesbian thought put together by Brianna Simone Jones. And so I just wanted to read a super quick quote from Audre Lorde. I'm going to read a short piece from Pat Parker, activist and American poet, lesbian, connected to Black Panther Party and the Women's Press Collective. And then I'll share a short piece from my own written for y'all today. I won't take too long. I felt like this Audre Lorde quote would just kind of put into context some of the intention behind what I was sharing which is, I am Black, woman, and poet. All three facts are outside the realm of choice. My eyes have a part in my seeing, my breath in my breathing, and all that I am in who I am. All who I love are my people, and it is not simple. I'm gonna read that one again. I am Black, woman, and poet. All three facts are outside the realm of choice. My eyes have a part in my seeing, my breath and my breathing, and all that I am and who I am. All who I love are my people, and it is not simple. And I think I chose to share that piece just or that quote because I'm Black every day, I'm a woman every day, I'm queer every day, and that lives in everything that I do. And sometimes I struggle to kind of figure out how to define myself for other folks. And so when tasked with trying to define myself for other folks in a poem, it's a little bit difficult, and I try to find the right way to reflect and honor all of me. And I think that like I've always struggled with figuring out which part of me needs to shift to the forefront in any given moment. And I think for a while I thought this was a hindrance, but I think that I in the latest few years have acknowledged and am aware that it is just an understanding that I am complex, that I am abundant, that I am layered, and that I have so much to offer. And so, you know, I'm going to skip the Pat Parker piece just to keep it super brief because I do want to hear from everyone else. So I'll read my piece, and we'll skip Pat Parker even though she's quite wonderful. This piece is called "Every Day I Am Awake, I Am Made Aware." I dared to name this body daily, its bones mirror and brick, internal and eternally reflective, a bound collection of earth and rain enshadowed, shaped to embody woman. I am only one study of she. I am porous with might, retentive, too often unable to ring free, and it is morning. And I am cupping my hands above the bathroom sink on a spring day in Ohio. Today, the ground is wet, and I spread a small pool across my face to wash or welcome whatever weight wishes to ail or honor me. Armor is a shifting tension sitting just beyond the skin, hovering like a filling cloud. I am willing to wear what is needed as long as it is my choice. I am willing to be worn with risk which serves revelation. I am willing to part for there to be light. Thanks, y'all.
Ooh. Thank you, Elise, for bringing a real measure of beauty and a measure of reflection to us, and for having this echo so deeply within us. Thank you. This is absolutely beautiful. Let's dive right in, right? So we have so much to cover. I don't even know where to start, but I want to start where we usually do, which is the personal, which is the human. And that is, how are you showing up today? It's Monday, April the 12th. What are you bringing to this space? Danny, let's start with you.
Well, I want to thank you first, Naima and Urban Consulate, everyone who's organized today's event. Thank you, Elise, for opening with those words. I'm very glad to be here. So what am I bringing? I'm just bringing the reality of this moment. And I think there are ways in which that there are similarities, there are commonalities in terms of how we're all experiencing this kind of pandemic moment. And there are a lot of differences. This political moment, where some of us are experiencing, think kind of a sense of hopefulness, and others of us are experiencing it in different ways. I think for me as a parent during the pandemic, this is hard. I mean, I spent my day getting my child tested for COVID so that she can go back to school. as early as possible and not have to quarantine for a full 10 or 14 days, which would have put a lot of stress both on me as someone who doesn't have childcare and on her as an only child who really needs to be around peers. I find what I'm bringing today is just the reality of like how hard this time is. And I'm not like overwhelmed by grief or by, exhaustion in this particular moment. And yet I'm aware that this has been a year and a half of, I'm sorry, not a year and a half quite, but over a year of just a lot of scrambling to make it through the day, kind of every day. I'm also aware that when I talk to friends, or even like colleagues or acquaintances with whom I have, a moment that's a little more intimate than usual, often they share things that they're going through in their personal lives that are devastating. I think so many of us are holding, a lot of us are in crisis, and a lot of us are putting on a kind of strong face to show up in professional settings, or maybe even to show up in social settings. I don't know. Luckily, that's not really how my social life works, but when you have a moment to really talk to folks, a lot of people are grieving, and a lot of people are dealing with a lot of difficulty. And I use my experience just as a parent, but it's whether you're, you don't have, it's not just about whether we're caring for young people. It's can be anything, but people are going through some hard things. And so I'm just really like aware of that. And um, my hope is that when we come through this period, if we do ever come through it in a sense that like, that if it can ever be said that this pandemic will really end, that we enter a period where people are just a little more honest about the fullness of our lives, that we're not like putting on a pretty face just to try to impress each other so much. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Danny. Ooh, that felt real. I mean, it's just so real. And thank you for that vision of what we might have when we come through this. I love the idea that one of the benefits, if you can say again, there is a benefit, is more honesty, more realness. You can do something with that. Kiana, what are you bringing to this space today?
Sure. So I'm trying to bring some positive energy into the space today. Honestly, it's been a rough day. It was a long day today. It was a Monday and it felt every bit like a Monday today. Very busy. But I was really looking forward to this conversation. So I could quickly put a smile on my face and kind of got excited once I logged onto the Zoom, being able to see so many people here, listening to Elise's powerful words, listening to Danny describe what she's bringing into the space has definitely lifted my spirits some. If I'm being honest, my mind has also been with our brothers and sisters in Minneapolis with the unfortunate murder of Dante Wright. And to know that that is happening just as the trial for George Floyd's murderer is happening. And then also to know that it was a minor traffic violation that escalated into murder is really heavy. So I definitely wanted to acknowledge that. And, just the struggle. We think about everything that's happened over the past year with the pandemic. And even prior to that, I saw something in the chat where someone mentioned that people have trying times and have had trying times before the pandemic that have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. So I'm feeling that, this conversation will bring some hope and bring some joy to some folks, hopefully. That's what I hope to bring to the conversation.
So it's we're all bringing a lot of we're bringing all of the weight and the fullness of ourselves to this conversation. And to that, I want to dig a little bit into some definition setting, right? As we're trying to get our minds around this really big topic and knowing all the layers of context we're bringing into it, let's kind of ground ourselves in something that we can move forward from. Let's just kind of connect amongst us. When I think about the bigness of the word woman, right? So much comes to mind. And the question I'm sitting with and I'm trying to grapple with as someone who identifies as a cisgender woman, a Black cisgender woman, mother, and all of the different fragmented layers that come with that. Just what does it mean to be a woman? And it's not meant, to be put out there to give all the answers, but really, when you plumb the depths of your own meaning, the meaning that you attach to that, what comes up for you? Oh, you're on mute.
I was just pondering the question out loud, thinking about it. There's so many different ways that you can answer that question, right? And I think for me, what it means to be a woman, other than the biological sense of that, right? Because we also know that that's not the sole definition, right? Of what a woman is, but for me, it's being a mom, being a daughter, being a sister to others, and being in relationship and being aligned with other individuals, self-identifying women that go through the same triumphs and struggles as I do. And so that to me is an extended version of what it means to be a woman, outside of generally what people, they look at you and they make a determination on who or what you are. But for me, it's much deeper than what the eyes can see.
Danny, what comes to mind when you think of your own, conception of what it means to be a woman?
Well, I think we're in an important moment because, as you mentioned, we are in your introductory remarks. There's a lot of challenging of the gender binary, kind of people who have been excluded from our understanding of womanhood and femininity are urging us to reconsider rigid and outdated notions of what womanhood, of how we've defined womanhood. I think, I'm learning a lot from trans and gender nonconforming people about how I was socialized to think about what it means to be a woman, and ways in which biology, ways in which I've assumed that biology kind of determines these things, and that's why not rethink some of that. But I think for me, I mean, I write a lot about pregnancy and parenting, and I write a lot about reproductive health as well. So I'm often writing about women and birthing people. And I think, to me, one of the most useful ways to think about womanhood is through the lens of misogyny. We know what it's like to be hated for being women. I do. So if we think about what is it that has been so threatening.
I don't really like this movie. It's too bossy.
Bossiness. I don't know if you can hear my daughter saying she doesn't like her movie because it's too bossy. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's instructive, and it's important to think about kind of what the rationale has been as we've been made to be second-class citizens, in some ways because of our status as women. What is it about us that's been so threatening? And this stuff, and maybe it was you, Naima, I think maybe Elise, like some of you referring to Audre Lorde or Pat Parker, it's like the literature is there. We have a whole canon of Black women who have written about these things, and not just Black women. I wrote the introduction for a reissue of Adrienne Rich's book of Woman Born, which is a brilliant meditation on motherhood and also womanhood. And she really gets to the root. She really, her exploration of misogyny and she wrote this book in, I think, 1974. and then revisited it in, I think, 86. Like, you know, the literature's there. We can go back and read, you know, people who have written brilliantly about womanhood and misogyny. And I'm thankful for the people who have left literature for us to refer to for better understanding of that very big question.
Yeah, and that legacy continues, right? Because we now have the mantle being passed to people like Mickey Kendall, right? Who have the author of Hood Feminism, who has expanded our view of a traditional cascade of white feminism to womanism to an expanded view, which she calls hood feminism, which is what takes place, the behaviors, the reactions, the love, the joy, the caretaking that Black women in disadvantaged communities take into account for each other. So we have this incredible legacy of contribution to this space that's expanding our view, not just of like feminism, big F feminism, but also what it really means to be a woman, and do that in a way that includes non-gender conforming people, right? So Kiana, I want to, so you have sort of pushed me into a place, like we had this conversation about Kiana Trabue shows up in a room, changing the whole game. What do people see, right?
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about, like, you show up ready to do your work? How do people receive you, right? And what are the unique sort of experiences that you have encountered showing up in spaces, you know, that you may not see the mirrors and windows that reflect back to you who you are as a Black woman? What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really interesting walking into a room and not knowing how people are going to receive you and how people are going to react toward you. It gets really interesting depending on what setting you're in. Oftentimes, and I know that there are others on the call who probably have experienced this as well. Oftentimes, you are the only woman. You may be the only Black person or person of color. You may be the only Black woman or woman of color in the room. You might be the youngest person in the room. So it just really kind of depends how people receive you when you walk in. I can only speak for myself. When I walk into the room, I always walk in as my full self. So you always get Kiana Trabue every single time. But Kiana Trabue is not always received that way. And so people do things that are really interesting. I've had people that have either commented on my hairstyles or have actually touched my hair or patted me on the head. I've had people ask me questions. We talk about microaggressions all the time. I've had people say, you know, is your boss here? And I have to tell them I am the boss. They ask, you know, how old I am because, oh, you just look too young to be doing X, Y, Z. And so it's just really interesting how people react to some of those things. And most of it is rooted in the fact that I am Black and that I am a woman, unfortunately.
Mm. And so it's like, where does one even go from there, right? It's so, like, talk about trying to make a situation that has all these delimited settings. Like, before you know it, somebody's all up in your hair. Before you know it, somebody's already stereotyped you and determined all the stories about you. So how do you enter these spaces and come out whole again?
So I think, yeah, so I think part of it is not compromising who you are, not compromising your voice, not allowing others to silence you in those spaces, making sure that you show up confident, bringing your ideas, bringing your full personality and the fullness of yourself into those spaces, and really just kind of commanding and demanding the respect that you know you are owed. Never walk into a space unprepared is how I kind of approach those things. I always make sure I know what I'm walking into, who's going to be there, what I've been asked to do. And then finding those spaces to make my voice heard and speaking up so that people have an understanding, regardless of what they see on the outside. When I leave that space, when I leave that interaction with you, you're going to know exactly who I am. And so hopefully you don't get it wrong the next time.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm like, oh, now I know. But so okay, let's talk about the spaces. Let's define the spaces, because for you, Kiana, you know, what we know is that you're operating at the intersection of healthcare equity, right? And city management and governance, right? So when you are in these spaces having huge impact, not just on our city, but like healthcare on a regional scale. So we've gone even beyond the boundary of city building. We've gone into regions, right? And
Yes.
you go from that scale to the village of Woodlawn. Talk about the meaning of city building within those two very different contexts, right? What has been the most unique joy that you've identified city building in those spaces? And what's been maybe some something that kind of rubs you the wrong way that you want to see change, not just for you, but for other Black women coming behind you, coming up next to you to do the work?
Yeah, sure. So it's really interesting being a public health professional for over 15 years and not ever thinking that I would be, you know, a quote unquote politician at this point in my life. But what being in public health taught me is that all health is political, right? So when we talk about how healthy cities, how healthy communities, villages, townships, whatever you want to call them, are created or are destroyed, it's through politics and policy. And so coming to that realization, it was kind of a reckoning for me when we think about all the things that happen to try to improve individuals' health, right? We have programs, we have weight loss programs, and we have diabetes programs and healthy eating programs, and all of those things are great. Not saying that they aren't. However, ultimately, how change is made is through policy. How these situations and inequities were created was by design, and it was through policy. So these structural discriminations around racism and sexism, classism, ableism, all the isms are the root cause. And then there were tools that were put in place. So those are laws, political processes, statutes, budgetary decisions, you know, how we spend money, how money is allocated, enforcement, law enforcement. Those are all the tools that are used to continue the discrimination, racism, sexism, ableism, classism, all the isms. And then from there, those tools then drive how our systems work and how our systems thrive, which in turn impacts the outcomes that we see across our cities. And so taking that kind of public health framework from my public health world into my political world, it's like, oh, same game, different players, right? Exact same thing.
Right. And you, I mean, you show up in systems, right? Like
Right.
it may be operating within different dimensions, but they're all systems, systems of government, systems of health that have,
Systems of education, all of, yes.
yeah. So I want to try to expand a view, because one aspect of this conversation that gripped me from the start is like, when you think of city building, Danny, we automatically go to hard infrastructure, right? Transportation, um, buildings, the built environment. But if we consider that cities, like the sum of a city includes so much more than that, soft infrastructure, right? So some of the things Kiana talked about, policy, laws, education, but then there are like ideas, and then there's like all these other things. Can you kind of help give us some insight into your expanded view of women who build the city that maybe colors outside of the lines that we typically think?
Yeah, I have to be honest, like this is a very interesting setting for me or frame, because I don't typically think about my work within the context of geography or geographic definition, right? So I'm just as likely to be on the phone with someone who lives in um, a suburban or rural area as I am in an urban area. And I say on the phone because that's these days how I do the majority of my reporting. I see myself first and foremost as a reporter. So when I talk about my work, like I'm talking about the interviewing and the storytelling that I'm doing. So this idea of city building is it's not one that I interact with a lot. You know, I think that there's an idea that when we are connected to cities, we're connected to better resources, or we have greater access to higher quality resources. I'm not sure how true that is. I just think that that's kind of a bias that a lot of people hold. So, you know, I think that I think women have a lot of power, like wherever we are, wherever we show up, we have the potential to shape our immediate worlds and the broader world. You know, we have that potential. Kiana was talking about policy, and I think that policy is incredibly important. But one of the things that I've learned a lot in recent years is also the power of culture. Creating new culture, shifting culture, and how a lot of times in order to really move policy, particularly new policies that can be a little bit intimidating to folks because they feel new, you have to simultaneously shift culture alongside that policy creation and moving that policy. And I think people, right? I think, and among people are women, right? We play a role in shifting culture. Like I said, I write a lot about parenting and I write a lot about reproductive health. And so in some ways, women are often at the center of the stories that I tell. And sometimes I write very kind of intimate pieces about families and parents. That was my approach when I wrote my book, which is kind of a mix between memoir and I reported on other families and focused on mothers and grandmothers. And sometimes I'm talking to birth workers, sometimes I'm talking to OBs and doulas and midwives. Sometimes I'm talking about people on the front lines of major reproductive rights battles. I wrote a piece, I think it came out near the end of last year, about some of the cultural changes that are happening within Planned Parenthood, some of the rethinking of how they position their founder, Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist and who has a really complicated history. The removal of her name from the New York City Health Center, where she was the founder of the New York City branch of Planned Parenthood, which was the flagship organization. So, I think that I'm curious, I'm like interested to, as this conversation goes on, to hear other people talk about what they mean by city building. And I think that we don't want to kind of remove that or separate that or put that on a different level from the kind of interesting and important work that's happening in other types of spaces, other types of other settings.
Yeah, I want to just name that you brought to light something that we grapple with at Urban Consulate, because you could just as easily map what we're talking about today in any context. It could be a rural context, it could be suburban. So, sometimes we operate on this false construct that everything that we're talking about through equity lens, gender equity, racial equity, healthcare equity, all of these things are just contextualized within cities. And of course that's a false sort of construct, I think. And I don't know, it may sort of limit the scope of our dialogue, but I appreciate you making that wider. But here's a curiosity, right? Go ahead, Danny. I see you unmute.
Well, yeah, no, I was just thinking, like, Kiana is the vice mayor of Woodlawn, right? Is that right? So I also think we're in this moment where, like, like anytime anybody uses the word inner city, I'm just like, stop. Like that's such,
Yes.
it means nothing. Like, are you talking about Black people? Because more and more, because of, you know, development and this kind of desire for these like prime real estate, you know, the shift that's happened in the past 20 years where, you know, the urban core has become this hot space. When people start talking about urban, you know, inner city as a synonym for like poverty and Blackness, like these are just terms that need to get thrown out. And I think, you know, the places like Woodlawn, like these places with these incredibly rich Black histories that are not cities, like Kiana corrected you and said the village of Woodlawn, like it's got its
Yeah.
own very interesting. I'm talking to you from Camp Dennison, Ohio, which is a Black enclave. A lot of people don't know that this was Black, because now the bike trail runs through here and it's very like rural, you know, like outdoorsy utopia or whatever. I'm talking to you from the house that my grandfather's grandparents built. This is a Black neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's just like, I just get like up in my feelings a little bit when we when we like oversimplify, you know, these ideas about who lives where.
Yeah.
It's a term, right, Kiana?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No, I was just saying, you know, we get up in our feelings because the term is freighted.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I wanna bring Elise, because Elise is dropping all these little gems in the chat,
She is.
things that she can like escape being brought onto the content. We're gonna bring her back right now. You just said something. You said cities are for people made of social connections and relationships. Let's use that as a definition of cities. That's more expansive. Tell me what
Yeah,
you
I was just thinking back to like our conversation a couple weeks ago and just learning more about Danny's work, etc. And I was like, yeah, I hear you. Like this isn't necessarily just about a conversation about city building or city spaces or whatever, or the word I hate, urban spaces. That's such an annoying phrase to me. And I'm just like, what do you mean, Black people? But yeah, I was just like, you know, like for me, any sort of connection that I have to community, like connections or like the spaces that I'm operating in, is just like, this is first people. This is first connections or things or resources for people. So it's just like thinking about that. It's like city building is like the frame of what we're, one of the loose frame that we're talking within, but like it all is connected to people, and like the communities that we're a part of. That's all.
there's another element here that I just want to bring into the because we're talking about cities, right? Meanwhile, a good friend of mine and brilliant author, Stephanie Dunning, she's a professor at Miami University. She just dropped a book called Black to Nature.
Mm.
And it's this incredible, just like tome about the history of, you know, essentially Black people's sort of aversion to nature because of the sort of Western narrative of who owns the land. Who
Mm.
we were meant to till the land. We were not meant to enjoy the land. I encourage everybody on this call, if you want to hear and read an exquisite sort of breakdown of that dynamic of, you know, Black people as an agrarian people, right? But also Black people as deeply connected to the land and to the earth and what it means to take a damn walk through the woods without your shoes on. Like,
Yeah.
right? So let's balance, you know, the benefit and beauty. They're both beautiful, but there is kind of a weight and, you know, girl trek, I think, sort of opened up
Mm-hmm.
this beautiful like cascade of mother nature for Black women again. It's just like, let's take a hike through the woods, right? And that has deep meaning in how we perceive our both our natural environment and our built environment. Kiana, I saw you come off mute.
No, I just was agreeing with what Elise was saying and just thinking about it being people focused and people centered when you talk about building cities, and not talking, you know, from an infrastructure framework, but really just about like how do we build people within cities to make our culture stronger, to make, you know, for generations to generations to generations. And we do that by building people, not by building streets and, you know, highways and houses and gentrifying and all of those things. It's really about building people. When I think about women, you know, in my experience, when women are leading, when women are really kind of at the helm of something, they tend to develop solutions that are most aligned with what the entire community needs, right? Not just themselves, but they consider the entire community and how it benefits everyone. And I think that's a distinction that I've seen and I've experienced, you know, in leadership between women and men.
And I mean, so you're hitting on something too that like I want to dig into, because my experience being around specifically Black women is like the yes queen type setting. Like every
Yes.
time I see Kiana sharing like good news, I'm like, yes.
Yes.
So part of building each other up is like celebrating your sis. I see you, girl. That the shine is too bright. Like, you know, that's like building each other up. Can we talk about the, you know, and there's a shadow side to that too, because not, you know, with the gatekeeping type situation going on,
Yes.
not all sisters are in your corner. Some is trying to cut, you know, protect their territory. But the more abundant space there is that of celebrating each other. Can we talk a little bit about that? The feeling that it's like, sis has my back, I'm going to have hers. And that creates this mountain of build that we can then, you know, scale together and grow together. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to open space for others to speak since I was just speaking. So I don't know if Danny had anything to chime in at this point, or
No, please go ahead, Anna.
Okay.
Or Elise, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so though I mean I see that all the time, and literally as soon as I see someone else celebrating another woman, it fills me up. It gives me such joy. And I think I'm not sure how many people understand how important and empowering that is, to have that sisterhood. And oftentimes, you know, it can be people that you are very, very close to, people that you have true friendship with, or, you know, sister, or you've shared some other bonding experience. But it's also people that are kind of in the periphery, right? That I may know you because you know a friend of mine. And just to kind of see that compound, one person after another, it motivates you to celebrate others when it's their turn
It's
as well.
this, isn't it?
Yes.
It spreads like wildfire. You know, my friend has my friend Mara Robson has this bumper sticker on her car that says, "The revolution will be love." And I'm like,
Yes.
yes,
I love it.
the revolution will be love, setting us all ablaze. Danny, do you have thoughts about the joy that you feel when you feel seen, you know?
Yeah, you know, I think it's funny, there was a comment in the chat when I was speaking about, you know, my experience in this pandemic of like, well, you know, problems precede the pandemic, which is true, and I don't want to belabor the point, but it's just like, I'm going to speak from my experience, and it's this has been a hard year. I think some of us have been pushed or willingly stepped back out into you know, out of our homes, maybe because we're an essential worker, you know, we're on the front lines in certain ways. We are more comfortable with risk, you know, like there are all people have engaged with this moment in really different ways. But I think for myself, I have been, and because I'm like afforded the luxury, I've always worked, you know, for the past 8 years, I've worked from home. So it's, you know, this has been a time of a lot of seclusion for me. And this is less a comment about the kind of public celebration of one another, although I think that that's incredibly important. What has really sustained me has been my authentic, deep, in many cases, years-long friendships. And while I love to be, you know, celebrated on social media or like whatever, what really has filled my heart and made me feel like I have what it takes to navigate these unprecedented times. And I know that that's such a like cliche at this point, that phrase, unprecedented times. But what has made me feel like I can do it is the people who have sent me that care package with that beautiful piece of fabric that I can wrap my hair in when it looks a mess and I still have to get on Zoom. the people who have sent me that tincture, that's like the stress relief tincture that I can drop on my tongue when I'm like, I'm really about to have a meltdown. My friends who I can get on the phone and cry with, or who I can say, you know, this is happening and it's really hard. So I appreciate you, Naima, talking about the kind of shadow side of the yes queen, black girl magic, rah, rah, rah. Like we're all just like shining at every moment of our lives. It's all so beautiful and this and that. The shadow side is like, and that's not really true, because sometimes it's not about yes queen over here. Sometimes it's real, not cute. And that's like the reality. And so I'm very thankful for the people who I have been able to lean on, who I can be my full whole self with, and who still celebrate me even within that, who will say like, yeah, and you wrote that incredible piece. This is all really hard, and you did this thing that I found real meaning and value in.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm very, very thankful for.
Yeah, I mean, it's this, and it's not even a duality. It's a multiplicity of dimensions when it comes to building each other up. Sometimes building Naima up is no, queen. Like, no, that's the wrong move, Naima. So, but there's a beauty in that too, right? That we can also have each other's back by telling the truth. No, don't take that job. That's not a safe place for you. Like, you know, like there are things we can do that may feel not so great, but they still have the outcome of helping build each other up. Because, you know, when we look at it, we keep thinking of like city building communities as this monolith, right? And really it's just a connection of interconnected souls and beings. And those interconnected souls and beings have these interior lives that the energy pours from, that then creates these big cities, right? And so when we tend to the interior, do you see what I'm trying to do? Like I'm trying to get us to a point where we see the value of that level of scale, right? As we consider what it means to contribute and build. Kiana?
No, I was just going to agree. And thank you so much, Danny, for bringing that forth, because you're absolutely right. And Naima, even you talking about, you know, sometimes it's yes, queen, and sometimes it's no, queen. And I think, you know, having this desire to create those spaces where both of those things can coexist, right?
Oh, I want
They
to ask,
have to.
can you double click that? I want to double click that though. How does that look like practically? How do you create space for those to show up together?
Yeah, so I think, you know, as we talk about, and as Danny shared, those really deep connections that we have with people, that are there for us in real life, right? Not just on social media, but in real life, that are there, to her point, you know, when your hair is looking a hot mess, and someone can say to you, hey, you really killed that today. You know, I really enjoyed the conversation that you had with Urban Consulate, but your hair was looking a mess, or your energy was off, or you said something that I didn't quite understand or quite connect with, right? That honesty, we crave that and we need that as well. And so for me, the yes queen has to be authentic and it has to be real in order for it to be meaningful.
Yes.
And if it's not, you can keep it.
And you can't fake that either. You can't fake that.
No, because people see right through it.
Yeah, I know I do. It's like, yes, queen, are you sure?
Are you talking to me?
So as we I want to kind of make sure we leave enough space for our breakout discussion, because I think that's going to really reveal a lot of what our audience is taking away. But if there were one thing that you would hope would be a legacy of yours, right? In city building, contributing to whatever facet of your work life, your passion, your vocation, what would it be that you think uniquely creates a stamp, um, uniquely creates a stamp that, yeah, you know what, I did this, right? What does that look like in your dreams?
The question is like, what do you hope is kind of a centerpiece of your legacy?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I hope I'm remembered. And I hope I am seen as part of a cohort of people who ask really hard questions at an important time and who ask questions that other people weren't asking to try to get at some truth, you know, to try to tell stories that weren't otherwise being told. I could say more about that, but I think that that's the heart. I think there's a way that investigative reporting, and I don't consider myself an investigative reporter, I'm more of an explanatory writer of feature length pieces. But I think there's a way that for a long time, asking hard questions about race and gender were not seen as serious. And especially writing about mothering and parenting was not seen as serious. It was the province of the mommy blog. And I hope that I'm part of a group of people who is changing that and showing that writing about families and writing about parenting and writing about the decisions that we make about what we do with our bodies, that's serious. These are serious interrogations. These are serious investigations. These are serious inquiries. And that readers are done a disservice when they don't get these kinds of stories. So my hope is that that's part of my legacy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Kiana?
Yeah, that was powerful, Danny. So when I think about my legacy, I think about every person that I've had the opportunity to touch or inspire or influence in some way. So, thinking about all the things that I've had the opportunity to do, that I've been blessed to be able to do, all of that's great. And all of the yes queens and all of that is awesome, right? Because you do get proud of yourself for, setting goals and knocking them out of the park every single time. But for me, I hope that everything I do, it really kind of removes myself from the center, and really centers other people and what types of opportunities are being created for others as a result of what I've been able to do. And so that's what I really hope my legacy is not, someone talking about, oh, well, she was the, executive director of this organization, or she was a vice mayor, or, things like that. But she did XYZ, which created a path and a space for someone else to come in to be able to succeed.
Oof. Both really beautiful visions. Those are durable visions of legacy. Institutional standing and positionality, who cares? How you made things better for people coming after you all day, how you brought light to the truth and elevating stories that aren't heard that help us, recast our notions of what it means to be alive and be kind and aware of one another. Yes. So those are really, really beautiful. I just want to thank you, Danny and Kiana, and Elise. I have to ask Elise what she wants, what she hopes her enduring legacy will be. I got to get you in on this.
I was thinking about it just in case you asked. I didn't get anywhere super clear just yet, but I don't know. I want to echo what Kiana was saying, just about like I want all of the different many multiple facets of my work to serve something beyond myself, and I think that that is how I act in my day job. That's how I am and deliver in my creative work. I think too, it's just I don't want it to be a focus of me. I want it to be something that make something better for people beyond myself. So just a continued legacy of that.
Absolutely beautiful. Stunning. And just as I had anticipated, this conversation has left me ablaze. Just the concept of the convo set me ablaze, and I'm still ablaze with your musings and your ideas and your light. So grateful for each of you. Elise Daniel, Danny McLean, and Kiana Trevu. Thank you. Thank you. So this concludes the first half of our Urban Consulate time together. I do want to give some instructions for those who are still joining us in Facebook land. Again, check out the chat in the comments, and in that chat will be a link to join us right here in the Zoom room, where we will actually get to dig into this topic a little bit deeper as a group in small breakout groups, so that you can hopefully come away with some deeper understanding, some deepened knowing, and maybe some new ways of knowing, some ways that may challenge you and surprise you. So let me just make sure that we are all set to go. And I am going to turn it over to my co-host, Meg Trischler.
Thank you, Naima, and thank you, Danny and Kiana and Elise, for an inspiring start to this month's salon. What a treat to just listen to you and learn from you. So as Naima said, so much of what the consulate is about is hearing from and listening and learning from our esteemed guests. And the other half is very much about hearing from all of you and being in discussion and being in dialogue. That's something that we really value. And so as we move into sort of this second half, this is your opportunity to sort of sit with what you've heard. What did it spark? What shimmered for you? And we're going to now go into breakout rooms and do a little deep dive into a question that we want to invite you to reflect on. Because it's a three-parter this month. So our breakout dialogue question is, who are the women in your life who are building the city? We've just heard a pretty a robust definition of what it means to build the city. So who are the women in your life who are building the city, however you would define that? What can you do to support them? And if you identify as a woman or non-binary person, what do you need? What do you need? What support? What does that look like for you? So it's a pretty packed in question. We have about, I think, 18 to 20 minutes for our breakout dialogues. And so we'll invite you to go into those rooms in just a moment. And just briefly, we like to sort of set the stage a bit as we're preparing to enter into discussion with one another, knowing that everybody is coming from a different space, a unique perspective. And so just want to invite you to embrace these 4 agreements that we've put together, borrowed from our friends, our partners over at Courageous Conversations. So the first one is just to stay engaged, to be present, feel your feet on the floor, your butt in the chair, wherever your body finds itself. Stay engaged, stay connected. The second one is to experience discomfort. Not all of our conversations are meant to necessarily be provocative, but we do talk about things that are meant to push and to pull a little bit. And of course, when you're in conversation with people that you might not otherwise intersect with, you're gonna feel some discomfort, and that's okay. That's part of why we're here, to expand our capacity to sit with some of those things that make us uncomfortable. So embrace that. Speak your truth. And that is just to say that, again, you know, we are all coming to these conversations with individual stories, individual perspectives, though we might identify with a particular group. So to the best that you can, speak your truth using I statements and not trying to speak on behalf of a whole group. And then the final agreement is to expect and accept non-closure. Some of I think the hardest thing that we sometimes grapple with the Urban Consulate is that we're diving into things that are lifelong journeys. And so that reality of not necessarily always getting to understanding the way that our human minds want, or always getting to sort of accept and come to terms with something, that's sort of part of the journey. So expect that, accept that. This is a journey that we're all on. And so we invite you to participate in that. So I think with that, JP, I think we're probably ready to go into breakout rooms, and we'll have about 18 minutes or so to have a dialogue and discussion.